Welcome into the Solo Shot Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Dom Manna. Happy Solo Shot Saturday, everyone. My apologies for last week's episode. There were some technical difficulties with the post, and it never ended up launching on YouTube. I had a pretty busy weekend with both Father's Day as well as my 25th birthday, which I was very blessed to be able to spend with my family and loved ones. And I rack at you this week with some more baseball content. Thankfully, in the grand scheme of things, last week's topics compared to this week's topics, there was a heavier lean to this week being more relevant. And that was mainly and first and foremost because of the passing of the greatest baseball player to ever live, Willie Howard Mays. Passed away on Tuesday, my birthday, and it really was a gut punch. And this is coming from a guy that never saw Willie Mays play, but as someone who appreciates the history of the game and what he means to it. It was absolutely a huge gut punch for baseball. 93 years old, hell of a life. And I think that there's been so much great coverage and so many great tributes to Willie Mays, whether they be murals over in Birmingham, different videos, compilations that have been put together, some statistical work that has been put out there. But Willie Mays simply was the greatest player that ever lived. And I know a lot of people talk about baseball being one of the sports that doesn't truly have an answer to that question of who the GOAT is. Like hockey has Gretzky and the NBA has Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps for swimming. Like there's a lot of sports where the GOAT is clear cut. And I think it's pretty clear cut in baseball too. And the reason I say this is because Willie Mays had all five tools, and he didn't just have them. He had them at an all-time elite level. I feel like baseball a lot of the time, because of that no clear GOAT conversation, there's a lot of greatest blank of all time. A lot of people will don Ted Williams, the greatest hitter who ever lived. Well, Willie Mays has more home runs and hits than Ted Williams and is top 10 all time in both those categories. Ricky Henderson is the greatest base stealer of all time. Willie has nowhere near the amount of stolen bases as him, but he has over 339 career stolen bases, which puts him in an elite category of only 9 players in history that have over 300 stolen bases and 300 career home runs. That combination of power and speed is extremely rare. Ricky Henderson did not have 300 career home runs. Willie Mays had 660 while missing 2 years in his early 20s serving in the war. Willie Mays does not have the greatest throwing arm of all time. Roberto Clemente has the greatest throwing arm in most people's opinions in baseball history. But Willie Mays was a 12-time Gold Glover at center field, which was a tiny bit tougher than right field. And the famous catch in the 1954 World Series that gets looked down upon as his crowning moment, his big moment, the catch. It's been said plenty of times, but that throw, the turn and throw to hold the runner from scoring, is just as impressive, if not more impressive, with his wheels being able to get to that ball. So he might not be the greatest defensive player in history. He might not be the greatest throwing arm in history. He might not be the greatest base runner in history. He might not be the greatest hitter in history. But he is top 1% of all those categories. And that's why he is the greatest player that ever lived. Willie Mays, rest in paradise. There have been so many amazing tributes, and the discussion now with Willie Mays passing, because he was clearly the greatest living baseball player, the oldest living Hall of Famer. Luis Aparicio now holds the title of oldest living Hall of Famer at 90 years old. God bless him, the only Venezuelan baseball Hall of Famer. Who is the greatest living player? There is a cohort of baseball fans and sports fans that do not want to say Barry Bonds because of his alleged steroid use. I think Barry Bonds has a pretty clear-cut argument to be the greatest living player with the amount of times he walked, the amount of hits he has, the 7 MVPs, the all-time leader in home runs. Barry Bonds has a heck of an argument. A lot of people are pointing to his counterpart, Ken Griffey Jr., who played a smooth center field just like Willie Mays, was a more positive role model with no steroid suspicions, and had a heck of a career in his own right. Over 600 home runs and over 200 stolen bases, a really well-rounded player in his own right. And that discussion, I think, is going to happen for a while. There's going to be the anti-steroid people or people that just don't like Bonds that say Griffey is the greatest living player. And there are going to be some people that say Barry Bonds is very clear-cut, statistically the greatest player living. But thankfully, both of them are not in their 90s, so this discussion will be able to happen for a long time. I do think the passing of Willie Mays, both in his Say Hey documentary as well as the tributes at uh, the Rickwood Stadium this past week, have done a lot of good publicity for Barry Bonds, a guy who it's an actual sin that he is not in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Whether he used steroids or not, it was never proven. He never took anything during the era where baseball was testing and suspending players, where there was an actual ban on these substances. He never served a suspension for performance enhancing drugs. And while all signs point to him having used them, he used them in an era where plenty of other players did use them or did not use them. And we really don't know. Some of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. Some of the guys are getting penalized. Barry Bonds was just that much better than everyone else, so he has the biggest target on his back. So I hope that Willie Mays, with his passing, can be that final push to finally get Barry Bonds in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He was his godson, obviously, and there's a lot of connections there, passing the torch from godson to from godfather to godson for the greatest living player. Giants legends, there are a lot of similarities there. But rest in peace, Willie Mays, and absolutely, absolutely heartbreaking for the sport of baseball. There have been so many great tributes, and I didn't even dive into the statistics that deeply. There's a lot of people that have done better jobs of that in a quicker period of time. But go check out his baseball reference page if you haven't looked at it in a while and just see how valuable he was, how well rounded his game was, and what a true legend of the sport Willie Howard Mays was. On an up note, Willie Mays' former team, the New York Mets, that have retired his number in the last handful of years. The Mick Mets, since Grimace has thrown out the first pitch, they're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They have a very positive run differential. JD Martinez is finally starting to hit for the boys. And it's been really fun to watch the Mets have some success. And the Boston Red Sox, my favorite team, have had a nice little run here, 7-2, 7-3 in their last 10. And they have been hitting home runs and stealing bases at a absolutely fun rate. They have not led the league in steals since 1939, and they are currently on pace to do so, with David Hamilton, the rookie, and Jaron Duran leading the way there, both in the double digits. Lots of speed and excitement. A lot of people are probably going to say, oh, I feel so happy for these teams with $200+ million payrolls that are finally starting to play good baseball. It's good for baseball when the Mets and Red Sox are competitive. I'm not saying that they have to dominate. I'm not saying they have to be the best teams, but it's good for the sport when these teams are good. And seeing the Mets rise with grimace, the Red Sox rise with some speed and a different approach to the game of baseball, it has been super fun to follow. The big difference, I think, between the Mets and the Red Sox has been the pitching. The Red Sox starting pitching this year has been really freaking good. And the offense is finally starting to reward them for pitching well with the extra bases taken, the extra runs scored. They're winning more games. They're playing quality baseball. And coming into the year, I did not expect the Red Sox or Mets to make the playoffs. But all I was hoping for both teams was for them to not hang their head and give up, to just be competitive, to have fun, to not get walked over. And these two teams have been playing great baseball and they deserve some credit. The New York Mets, led by Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. They were looked at as obvious sellers for the deadline with guys like Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz and Starling Marte kind of rotting on the roster. But now the Mets might stay put at the deadline and see what they can do. In that NL East, it's not going to be easy. The Phillies are far ahead, and the Braves are a much better team. But the wild card in the National League is so flat right now that the Mick Mets might actually make a little bit of a run. Now, on the Red Sox side of things, they're right in the middle of the AL East, which is not where anyone was expecting them to be. After sweeping the Toronto Blue Jays, they lost to the Reds last night. They were having a nice little solo shot swag off that the Reds ended up breaking that streak of back and forth solo home runs and winning the game 5-2. So boo them. But the Red Sox have been playing really good baseball, and now they're 4 games over 500, and they're well ahead of both Tampa and the Blue Jays to not be in last place. And I think a lot of Red Sox fans, if they could just say, we're not going to be in last place for the third time in a row, they would take that. So the Red Sox playing good baseball and a team that was looking like, well, they're going to sell Kenley Jansen and Tyler O'Neill, who are free agents at the end of the year. And they're going to sell any players that they don't see as part of their future plans, a la Rafael Devers, Cedon Rafaela, Tristan Casas, and by the looks of it, David Hamilton and Jaron Duran. Now, the Red Sox have a really good run differential going. They're playing good baseball. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs. Right now, they're in a good spot in the wild card. The Royals have came down to earth a little bit. The Minnesota Twins have been hot and cold. And obviously, whoever doesn't win the division between the Orioles and the Yankees is going to get a wild card spot. But there's 2 wild card spots open in the American League, and the Red Sox have a chance to win one of them, and that's super exciting. I'm not going to put all my eggs in the basket until they're still in it when August rolls around. But right now, you just got to be happy to see competitive baseball out of these 2 markets that have some great fans, that have a ton of national reach, and seeing the Mets and Red Sox competitive this late into the year, June 22nd. It is good for the game of baseball, whether you're a big market fan or a small market fan. Seeing this is good. Now, speaking of the Twins, they've been hot or cold, but Mr. Royce Lewis has been out of his freaking mind. Since returning from injury, Royce Lewis has played in 16 games in 2024. He played opening day, and then he was out on the injured list, and he's came back and he's played 15 games, 10 home runs, OPS over 1,200. This is a guy who wasn't just a pretend breakout last year. He is insanely good. And I know Minnesota Twins fans, they've been here before where a guy who's healthy is an MVP candidate, Brian Buxton. They've been here. But Royce Lewis is swinging on a whole nother level. He literally said to his hitting coach, I don't know what a slump is. I'll never be in a slump. I don't slump. Royce Lewis does not slump so far in the big leagues. In 93 career games in Major League Baseball, he has 30 home runs. he plays in Minnesota. He's not getting the national love he deserves. He missed a big chunk of the season. So his chance of garnering MVP support or all-star consideration is low. I hope he gets in as an all-star reserve because he's been that good. But Royce Lewis, man, must watch at bats right now. And as long as he stays healthy, will be must watch at bats for the rest of the season. I know I've given some flowers to some Minnesota Twins players recently. Ryan Jeffers being the most deep dive, but even Carlos Santana, who's came in as a good veteran, just played his 2000th career major league game the other day, 300 career home runs, a really nice career. This Minnesota Twins team, they have the talent to make the playoffs, and that's why I picked them to win the division. I did not see the Royals and Guardians playing this good of baseball right now, but it's good that the AL Central is competitive. Like I said before, with the Mets and Red Sox being competitive is good for baseball. These smaller markets, smaller payroll teams also being competitive is good for baseball too. And seeing the Guardians, seeing the Twins, seeing the Royals all in the thick of it is amazing for baseball. And Royce Lewis is one of the biggest stars in the sport that does not get talked about as such. If you have a chance, MLB TV, MLB Audio, or wherever you are in the central time zone, check out Royce Lewis. Watch his at bats. There's a good chance he's going to hit a home run at least every third game. Now, here at the Solo Shot Sports Podcast, we like to throw it back down the third base line to this day in baseball history. And June 22nd actually had a laundry list of potential things, whether they be really good games or performances. Carl Hubble, one of the greatest left-handed pitchers that ever lived, was born on this day. Big shout out to him. We talked about Willie Mays earlier. Willie Mays, a 20-year-old Willie Mays in 1951, hit a 10th inning home run, 3-run home run to give the Giants a 9-6 win in extra innings. And that was amazing. But there is a player who I think does not get talked about enough, unless you're a guy named John from the Pennsylvania area. Then you talk about him quite a bit. But Wade Boggs hit his first major league home run on this date in 1982, securing his spot in the Boston Red Sox everyday lineup. They ended up winning 5-4 over the Detroit Tigers that day, which, with the Carney Langsford injury, allowed Wade Boggs to Wally Pipp himself into the Red Sox everyday lineup. And, well, as they say, the rest is history. Wade Boggs is one of the elite contact hitters to ever play the sport. And I just don't think he gets enough love in the grand scheme of baseball. This is a guy who has over 3,000 hits, and that's probably what he's known best for. He has 3,010 hits. His 3,000th hit was a home run as well for the Tampa Bay Rays. But it is insane that a guy who only had 118 home runs in his illustrious career was still able to accumulate 12 all-star appearances, 2 gold gloves, 8 silver sluggers, and 5 batting titles, a 91.4 career WAR, a career 328 hitter. He led the league in plate appearances 3 times. He led the league in runs scored twice. He led the league in hits once. He led the league in doubles twice. He led the league in walks twice. And those 5 batting titles were in a 6-year stretch, 4 in a row from 1985 through 1988, where he also led the league in on base percentage for 5 straight years, 6 out of 7 years from 83 through 89. And this is a guy whose career OPS plus is 131, a guy who was a third better than the league average hitter throughout his entire career without hitting bombs, without slugging for a crazy high slugging percentage. He only slugged over 500 one season in his entire career, but he was Mr. Consistent. He was a top of the order bat that was insane. And I think something that gets overlooked about Wade Boggs, I was talking about Barry Bonds being the obvious choice, in my opinion, for the greatest living baseball player. And a big part of that is in an era, nobody close to him was intentionally walked as many times. Barry Bonds was intentionally walked 682 times, led the league in intentional walks almost every single year during his prime. Teams chose to not pitch to him. Wade Boggs from 1987 through 1992, that is a 6-year stretch, led the league in intentional walks 6 years in a row. That's a feared hitter. And Wade Boggs, this is a guy who didn't win an MVP, but got MVP votes in 8 different seasons. A true baseball professional, despite him going from the Red Sox to the Yankees and then to the Rays. I have a lot of love and respect for Wade Boggs, and I hope you guys do too. The career of Wade Boggs essentially started on this date, June 22nd, 1982, as the Red Sox rookie third baseman hit a home run to help win against the Tigers, taking over for Carney Langsford while he pipped him, and the rest is history. Red Sox Hall of Famer, baseball Hall of Famer, and I believe he's in the Yankees Monument Park as well. Heck of a career from Wade Boggs. He won that World Series championship with the Yankees in 1996, and a guy who was on a very high percentage of first ballot votes elected to the Hall of Fame in 2005, and a guy who still has a great head of hair, still a great ambassador for the game, still great to his fans, and a guy that I think just needs to be looked at a little bit more often for how great of a hitter he truly was, especially in an era where he had a counterpart that was just as impressive and maybe even a little bit more beloved in Tony Gwynn in the other league. Now, wrapping things up here, there was a shocking retirement announcement last night, actually. Uh, Cole Hamels retired from the game of baseball last year. Cole Hamels had last pitched in the majors in 2020 during the COVID shortened season. He had bounced around with a couple stints in the minor leagues since, but he was not able to rejoin a major league roster. He's only 40 years old, so he did give it his all to pitch while he was still in his 30s. And I do respect that, but the game of baseball pretty much told him it was done. He announced his retirement as a member of the Phillies, and they honored him last night. And Cole Hamels is a really interesting case. This is a guy who was a 4-time All-Star and had that amazing 2008 postseason, where he was the World Series and NLCS MVP. Cole Hamels in his career, 59.0 WAR. When you have 60 plus WAR, it really raises an eyebrow for me, pitcher or hitter. This is a guy that his record in his career is 163 and 122. So he didn't get quite 200 wins in his 15 years of service, but he still averaged over 10 wins a season. So it's not the worst. 3.43 career ERA. So that was solid. And this is a guy who struck out over 2,500 batters, 2,560 strikeouts. A lot of people back when he was around as a pitcher in his mid 30s, around 2,500 strikeouts, thought that he was a sneaky guy to get to 3,000 Ks. And if he got to 3,000 Ks, I feel like everybody and their mother would be calling Cole Hamels a Hall of Famer. But he did not get there between age, injuries, performance, etc., whatever else mental maybe off the field. Cole Hamels is going to be an interesting Hall of Fame candidate. And it's because of the way that baseball is looking at pitchers today. Now, I plan on diving into this a little bit deeper as the years go on, and there's some other candidates that hit the ballot. But Cole Hamels is going to be a really interesting litmus test for the writers. Are they going to look at things like the strikeouts, the whip, and the WAR? Or are they going to more so look at the counting stats and being like, well, you don't have to get 3,000 strikeouts and 300 wins anymore, but if you can get around 200 wins with a good strikeout ratio, you're a candidate. And maybe Cole Hamels falls short there, or maybe Cole Hamels gets pumped up in a way that his former teammate Chase Utley has with the sabermetrics crowd in the current voting poll. And Cole Hamels all of a sudden doesn't have to get to 3,000 strikeouts to be a Hall of Famer. He just is a Hall of Famer for his strikeout ability in his career. He was a career 123 ERA plus with an 8.5 K per nine. Really good player that struck out three batters for every walk, 3.34 strikeout to walk ratio. So he was a K artist and a guy who, even though he tailed off at the end, had a really good prime from 2011 to 2016. He had 5 straight seasons of 200 plus innings. So he worked. He had a K percentage. He was called Hollywood Hamels. There's a lot of things about Cole that could garner some serious Hall of Fame consideration. Regardless, I don't think he's a candidate that falls off year one. He's going to be a guy that at least I think can get around some Mark Burley level support, being in the teens to low 20s. I appreciate you guys for spending part of your Saturday with me. There's a ton of great baseball to enjoy this weekend. I myself will be going out to St. Louis to visit Busch Stadium for the first time. So I'll come back and review that experience with you all next weekend. Have a happy Solo Shot Saturday and a great rest of your week. I will catch you guys in the next one.